Hey guys, welcome back. Birbfest has been really helpful for me so far because it gives me a reason to draw more often again. I struggle a lot with perfectionism and I don't want to ruin pages in my sketchbooks, so I tend to plan too much and end up spending hours on one perfect piece. With this challenge, I wanted to get back into drawing more regularly, but in a simple, faster way. Something more like a warm-up, not a full detailed illustration every time. I also wanted to use fewer materials because I always pull out too many supplies and then don't even use half of them. Even when I travel, I pack too much, so this is also a way for me to practice working with limited tools and learn that you don't need a lot to make good art. So for this video, I actually took my time before each prompt to think about how I could simplify the drawing and which materials I really needed. I wanted to keep things minimal but still interesting. For this one I used Kuretake paints. At first I pulled out a bunch of colors, but then I narrowed it down to only 5. I also used 4 Polychromos pencils for details. Keeping the palette limited helped me keeping the sketch simple and loose. For this bird, I wanted to keep things very simple. It's a cute bird, but to be honest, I found the prompt itself a bit less exciting, so I decided to approach it in a very minimal way. I started with the inking this time using a Pigma Micron pen. I didn't add a lot of details with ink. The line work was mainly meant as a guideline. I already knew that most of it would disappear under the colors later, so I kept the lines light and minimal. Once I was done with the line work, it was time to add some color. I really wanted the focus to be on the blue, so I wanted it to stand out and feel strong and vibrant without overworking the drawing. I used Ecoline markers as a base and added Polychromos pencils for the finer feather details. I really like how intense the blue turned out in the end. It feels bold and fresh while the rest of the drawing stays quiet and simple. For this bird, I chose a reference photo that immediately stood out to me. The way it's looking back over its shoulder feels so sassy. This bird has so much character since the bird is mostly white with these beautiful blue, purple and almost black tones. I started by blocking in the darker areas with very light watercolor washes. Nothing too detailed. Really just 1 or 2 layers to suggest the form. For that I used 2 Van Gogh watercolors, Payne's Grey and Indigo. Because the bird has such a strong personality, I felt like the line work needed personality as well. That's why I chose a Fudenosuke brush pen, which gives you a lot of variation in rich black lines. The slightly thicker lines add more weight and make the drawing feel more dynamic. The crest of this bird is especially interesting. The long tail feathers feel very elegant. Even though the pose is sassy, there is still something very graceful about it. Honestly, queen of the prompt list. With this prompt, I started to feel a bit of challenge fatigue. I really wanted to draw other things as well, so I made the conscious decision to keep the next 2 prompts much simpler. Luckily, the following bird species were perfect for that. They're quite large but visually very simple. For day 19, the color palette of this bird is extremely minimal, which made it easy to choose my materials. I limited myself to just 3 Kuretake Gansai Tambi paints and a brown ink pen pen for the line work. I kept the lines very simple as well. What mattered more to me here was choosing an interesting pose. The way the bird is standing in profile, head tilted upwards and an open beak is something I normally wouldn't draw. Because of that, it actually turned into a really good challenge for me. In the end, this prompt gave me exactly the motivation I needed to keep going, even though I was feeling a bit burned out. As I mentioned before, I was really glad these birds were simple because it allowed me to draw other things too. In between, I had a lot of fun painting illustrations for my shorts videos, so if you haven't checked those out yet, there are some really cool pieces there. Anyways, the bird looks so funny with its messy hair. Since the feathers are so expressive, I didn't want to use regular fine liners because the lines would be too thin, but I also didn't want to use my Fudenosuke brush pen again. That's when I decided to finally try the Pigma Micron brush pen I bought a while ago but never used. Just a typical artist problem. Anyways, it turned out to be the perfect moment to use it. First I struggled a bit because I'm not used to drawing with such a soft tip, but I quickly got into the flow. I have to use this pen more often because the line variation is amazing. You get so many different line weights from just one tool. Since the bird isn't very colorful, I used a few Ecoline markers for the coloring. Markers work well on this paper, but not as well as in my old Fabriano Venezia sketchbook. Still, they are simple and a quick medium to use and are always easy to grab. I was feeling motivated again, especially because I was excited to use watercolor pencils again. This bird is super colorful, and that's exactly why I love working with watercolor pencils. They are really simple and fast to use, and I've been using them regularly for about a year now. Last year during Birbfest, I discovered my love for these pencils, and since then I've used them a lot, especially for drawing fish. Over time, the way I use them has become simpler but also more efficient. I start by laying down color on the paper without thinking about details, and then I activate it with water, and that's where the magic happens. The colors become so vibrant and rich, and you can barely see the pencil texture anymore because everything blends together so smoothly. After that, I can add all the fine details with the pencils again. The colors dry quickly, so you can work pretty fast. The reason I love this pencil so much is because the colors are so intense and saturated. I'm really happy with how this one turned out. Prompt 22 was another very simple bird, so I decided to draw two of them this time. I looked through a lot of reference photos, but this one really stood out to me, mainly because the branch they're sitting on grows in such an interesting way. The birds sit at different heights and face away from each other, so the composition felt really cool. The only thing I regret is that I didn't add more details with the pen. I wish I had drawn more texture in the line work. After the simple line work, I colored the birds using a limited color palette of Van Gogh watercolors. The details in the wood are my favorite part. They turn out really cool and realistic. I'm not completely satisfied with the birds themselves, but that's the theme of this video, simplifying things. In the end, I'm glad I didn't overwork it and left it this simple. For prompt 23, I picked a more tricky pose. There's also a version of this bird with a brown belly, but I chose the white one because the reference photo really spoke to me. The pose was definitely a challenge because you basically have to sketch it upside down, but I took my time and worked through it. Since this bird has a lot of black details, I chose black ink again. I started with fine lines using a fine liner and then filled in the black parts with a brush pen. I wasn't sure for a while which medium to use for the two other colors the bird has. I didn't have any markers in that teal shade and I didn't feel like getting out watercolors. Then I noticed I had a Derwent Color Soft pencil in the exact color, so I used that and a Polychromos pencil for the orange brown. I intentionally left the branch white with only black outlines because I think it looks really cool and the yellow circle in the background adds extra contrast. For the last prompt, the bird was very simple again, mostly black and white with just a bit of yellow in the wings. Because of that, it felt like the perfect moment to work with ink again. This bird looks incredibly fancy with its bold black stripe patterns. Those markings were basically asking to be drawn with brush pen, and the process itself was very satisfying. The strong contrast and confident lines really suit this bird, and it ended up looking very elegant. I'm really happy with how this one turned out. Overall, this part of the Birbfest challenge really helped me shift my mindset. Instead of overthinking every page or trying to make everything perfect, I focused on simplifying, both in the drawing itself and in the materials I used. Not every piece turned out exactly how I imagined, but that's kind of the point. Letting things stay simple, unfinished, or imperfect was part of the process, and I'm glad I didn't overwork these pages. Challenges like this remind me that drawing doesn't always have to be a big polished project. It can be a warm-up, daily practice, or just a moment to enjoy the process. Also, you don't need a huge amount of supplies to make good art. Anyways, if you enjoyed this, let me know in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more sketchbook videos. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one.